Thanks for listening to Eat Your Content. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the podcast through my merch store on TeePublic. Get great quality items like t-shirts, hats, mugs, and more, all sporting the vibrant Eat Your Content logo. Go to teepublic.com/user/eatyourcontent for more great items, and thanks for your support. Welcome to the Eat Your Content podcast, your home for all things food and pop culture. I am your host, Rich Herrera. Just a quick reminder to follow me on socials, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, at Rich Herrera and at Eat Your Content. And make sure you like and follow on all your podcast player of choice so you know when things are coming out. A couple of program reminders. I will be recapping season 3 of The Bear over the next few weeks, so make sure you're liking and following so you know when those come out. On today's show, I am happy to welcome Chef Savannah Miller to the podcast. She is from the Research Triangle area of North Carolina, opened restaurants such as Glass House in Durham, and was a chef de cuisine at M. Tempura, also in Durham. But you probably know her best as one of the finalists from Top Chef Wisconsin. Chef Savannah, welcome to the pod. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
Oh, great. So congrats on being a finalist on Top Chef. Huge accomplishment. What's the feeling now that all the episodes have aired? I don't know if you watched them all or have had watch parties, but what's the feeling like having seen it all and experienced it? Where are you at mentally right now?
That's a good question. I think doing the experience and then reliving it obviously are two different things. I feel, number one, like so grateful that I was able to go and have this crazy experience and learn all these things and meet all these cool people. And yeah, just like rewatching all the episodes, it's been really fun getting to enjoy that with your friends and family. And for me, like the city of Durham, honestly, it's been so fun to watch everyone get so excited. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you go through the same emotions watching it that you did when you lived it. So it's a little interesting to have that experience so many months later, but overall, I would say it's just been a whirlwind. I'm happy now that everything has concluded and that I can kind of start, feeling out what the next steps are. And it's just been such a big part of, it's been my entire life in my world for basically a year now. So I don't know, it feels kind of weird. It's like you're in this crazy tornado and then you get spit out and it's like, okay, what now? So
before we get into the Top Chef proper, talk a little bit about your background. What was the circumstances that you found yourself in that said, you know what, I want to be a chef. I want a career in the hospitality industry.
Yeah. I think, everyone obviously has different experiences. I think there's a lot of people who are kind of like, I grew up in a household where, my grandmother taught me how to cook or things like that. For me, it was a totally different experience. I started working in restaurants in high school, and I had always been on sports teams or a part of like ensemble casts and theater productions. And I was really drawn to the idea of a team and working really well on that team. And how do we execute a vision perfectly every day? And how do we come back for the next service? And how do we improve on this? So for me, I was really attached to that early on. And then because I started working in restaurants, kind of like in the front of house, I've worked every position, but that was my entryway. And very quickly, a year or two after joining the first few restaurants I was a part of in my hometown, I just realized that I wanted to be on the hotline and I wanted to be on the other side. And so it was a kind of like a slow transition. And then I just completely like jumped off the dock and I went to culinary school and I, put all my eggs in that basket. And then from there, I was in Vermont for a while, and I'm from North Carolina, but going up north and like being around just the crazy agriculture and just all of the fresh foods and having those experiences, and then moving to Boston and cooking in the city, I just completely fell in love with it. So yeah, I think for me, it really started with wanting to be a part of a greater thing and a part of a community. And just like the hospitality industry as a whole, going out to eat as a kid was like the best thing in the world for me. I loved the production of it, and I thought it was so special and ceremonious. So yeah, that's kind of what like drew me in the first place. Yeah.
So I feel fairly confident in saying that if for most, if not all of your professional career, Top Chef has been on TV. So at what point in your career did Top Chef become a bucket list or a goal for you? And you're like, yes, I want to be on that show.
Yeah, so I started cooking about 12 years ago. I'm 28 now, so I was, freshly 16. It's definitely been on for longer than, I've been cooking. I think it's 19th year, but the 21st season. I have watched the last 10 seasons, pretty hardcore. I wouldn't say when they're airing, but I've gone back and, watched them all. And it's always been something heavy for like the last six or so years that was like, I would love to do this one day. My fiance and I, when we first started dating, we would always say like, okay, we have to leave the restaurant early tonight. It's Top Chef night. And, we would always go home and watch it. And it was just something special that we shared. And I've known, one person really to go on the show prior. So I really locked on in his season and was really rooting for him. And I always wanted to do it. For me, it was something that was like in 5 years, in 5 years, I'll be ready. And I think getting the opportunity to do it this year, or I guess last year, I definitely had those feelings of hesitation. Like, oh my God, I would love to be 110% like confident that like, I'm going to go kill it. But it was definitely more of a, okay, girl, like, here's your chance. Like, you wished for it. Like, you asked and you received. So here we go. Like, but yeah, I mean, I've definitely always wanted to do it. I think I was just a little bit afraid of it.
Yeah. So you mentioned you were a fan of Top Chef before you started cooking. How much of being on Top Chef actually shaped you being the kind of chef that you are? Did you gravitate towards maybe jobs or positions that kind of set that up to be like, you know what, if I want to be on Top Chef one day, I need to learn X? Was that part of it, or was that just kind of in the back of your mind and it was just serendipitous that this kind of all came together?
I think maybe it's more like subconsciously, but like, the things I admire about the people who have really excelled in this platform are people who are kind of like a jack of all trades. Maybe they have a good pastry background, or they're really ready to be the front of house position in Restaurant Wars because they've done that too. They're technically driven, they're creative, they have certain assets that you really need to do, like a cooking competition in particular. So, I think those are things that I strive to have, whether or not I was really like linking it to being on Top Chef one day, or I was just linking it to like, I subconsciously, like, these people like Brooke Williamson, Melissa King, for me, those are two big ones. Stephanie Samar, like, these people have all these amazing talents, and I want to be just like them because they're some of my favorite chefs, but they also coincidentally rocked it on Top Chef. So I think it just kind of came naturally, but it was probably there all the time.
Yeah, yeah, just kind of simmering in the back of your mind. I'm probably assuming.
Yeah, and
Uh,
like, I don't think you ever, I mean, for me, I don't ever think that I saw myself like, those are like your heroes. You know what I
right,
mean? So it's
right,
not
right.
like, I'm going to be the next blah, blah, blah. But it's like, oh man, it'd be so cool if I could just try to like emulate that. So,
Yeah. So once you found out you were on the show, you clearly studied. I mean, you read entire cookbooks by Chef Sean Sherman for the Indigenous Food Challenge. You immediately knew the national dish of curacao when you landed there. So a lot of studying involved. But I think the part that I found most interesting is that you mentioned your then boyfriend, now fiance. Am I safe to say husband now?
oh no, we've been like, we just laughed because we're like, okay, like all the episodes are done airing. We can start planning the wedding now. So we are still just engaged, but we wanted to like be present and give this time, all of our focus.
Right. So the part that was interesting to me is that he helped you with quick fires. I want to know, what did those quick fire practices look like? Did you just pull out random ingredients from the fridge and pantry and go, you got 30 minutes to make something?
It's really funny. The very first one, so it was after a service at the restaurant and everyone had cleared out. The place I was working at actually was like a very big campus. And so there was a staff gym. And so while I finished closing the restaurant, he had gone and worked out and he came back and sat down and was like, okay, I hadn't gotten the call yet, but I was training as if I was going to go either way. And he had just like worked out and he was like, I want you to make me a protein packed meal and you have 30 minutes, and that was
Wow.
like the first one. And then from there, it really varied. As we found out it would be Wisconsin, we started diving deeper into, okay, like today we're going to read Sean Sherman's cookbook and we're going to go pick up venison and we're going to go pick up rabbit and you're going to make, a 3-course dinner and you're going to have to use this game meat, or we're going to go to the farmer's market because most likely you'll probably go to the Dane County's farmer's market in Madison, and you have 20 minutes, and everything you buy, you then have 30 minutes when we get home and you make a dish. So number one, he's just extremely supportive, and he loves the show. So he's, good at conceptualizing certain challenges, but he also was like, yeah, make me breakfast. So,
And you got 30 minutes.
yeah. So it was a win-win. I needed to be challenged, but he also, I'm sure, loved, like, he's also, would always do the dishes after. So he brought in some hands, but he enjoyed it as well. But he was really helpful.
Did you have like family coming in posing as judges? Okay, you're going to be Tom and you're going to be Gail.
I had girlfriends over. Like, honestly, the night before I left, it was my birthday the day I flew out. And so the night before, we had some friends over kind of to say, like, we'll see you in a few weeks. Goodbye, happy birthday. But for that dinner, I cooked like a 5-course meal for everyone. And
Wow.
It was just like, yeah. And it was bringing in different like inspiration, and like, my kitchen's not crazy. I just have a normal house. But so I like set it all up and all my appliances, and I got the table set. And at the end of it, I was like, I know it's my birthday, but like, can you just give me like the worst feedback possible? Like, can you just really tear this apart? Because that's what's going to happen when I arrive. So I'd rather hear it now and kind of get used to that. I really didn't have I had no prior experience in doing cooking competitions, on air, off air. And so it was interesting to even like my friends, like give them these dishes and be like, okay, so what you have today is blah, 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 and please, what do you think about it? But we definitely did all of the above.
That's really great to hear that you practiced a lot. And I think some of that is what some people online, Top Chef fans, are calling the Boudeleau effect. is really just gamifying Top Chef and really studying. And the ones that do really well on this show do the Google rabbit holes down Wisconsin and trying to figure out, what are some regional dishes there that might pop up, and practicing those. So, and I think that obviously paid off in dividends as being the finalist on Top Chef Wisconsin. You really knew a lot about going into Wisconsin, knew a lot about going into Curacao. So really interesting to hear, you're having your friends play judges and like, okay, just give it to me straight. What is this? Don't be my friend right now. Be a judge.
Yeah. Be my friend by being honest. And like, I think I've been listening to a few of your episodes, like in preparation.
Oh, thanks.
I'm always trying to do my homework, but you had somebody on a few weeks ago who said like my biggest strength is knowing my weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
And that really resonated with me. And I was like, I think that's a big reason why I did want to come as prepared as I could and try to be a student, because, like my experience and the years I've put in, I'm not going to fast forward and have 20 more years experience and like Dan, and like the technical abilities of someone like Danny. Like, I'm not going to out technique Danny, not today. And so for me, it was like, how can I, like, what do I have? And I know I have a lot of heart, and I have a lot of grit, and I have a computer, and I have a pen and paper. And so like for me, it was leaning into the things that I knew I could control, and studying helped me get to a certain point where I felt like I could have more fun, because I already knew a lot of the inspiration behind, maybe that challenge specifically.
Yeah, and speaking of heart, we'll talk about that as we talk about some of these individual highlights of your season. But yeah, heart really, really came out. I was really impressed to see just seeing you dig down deep and get in there and go through that. So let's talk about some of the highlights through the season, just a few things. So episode 1, and I'm not going to go through all 14, obviously, but episode 1, Kristen Kish asked people to raise their hands if they were James Beard Award winners, if they worked in Michelin star restaurants, if they've competed on, in Kevin's case, have you been on Top Chef before? And a lot of them raised their hands. You were one of those that couldn't. So at that moment in time, did you have a little bit of imposter syndrome for just like a half second of like, oh my gosh, look at all these people that are around me?
Oh my, longer than a half second, and it wasn't a surprise at all. I've watched enough of the show that I knew that question was going to come. And And so I was prepared for that. And I also knew that there's no way there weren't going to be heavy hitters like coming into that kitchen. So I anticipated that moment. I didn't anticipate anybody having competed on actual Top Chef before. Kevin was a curveball. I was like, damn it. But I think, there's a ton of feelings that go with it. But I always tried to just remind myself that like, I wouldn't be having this opportunity if I wasn't ready for it. And
Right.
that mentality of having whatever, if I'm going to embrace that imposter syndrome, like I'm never going to cook the way I want to, and I'm going to be scared. And so I think it took me longer than I really wish it had to get out of that mindset. I mean, there's even the first few weeks, I was just terrified. But I think eventually I definitely popped out of it and I enjoyed the experience for what it was. And I felt like I had earned my place. But yeah, I 1000% had those feelings going in and those nerves, but it also gave me a different type of motivation as far as like, okay, like I would love to be underestimated and people won't expect much and I can do a lot with that.
Yeah. So I don't know how many of episodes of mine you listen to, so let me be the first to just apologize because me and my co-host had our inaugural Top Chef season 21 draft. And
I didn't listen to this, so tell me what you said.
so okay, we don't know a lot about the chefs going in other than what's put out there into the public, right? I mean, we can kind of deep dive into like social media and whatnot, but for the most part, the bios that are given to us are what we know. So I'm going to apologize because you were picked last.
It's okay.
You were picked last because we were running through the list and we're like, okay, I don't know how far Savannah's going to make it. I'm sure she's a great chef. She's on the show because she's a great chef, but man, look at the pedigree on some of these. So as we were discussing each chef individually, we're like, okay, so where do we want to put her on the draft? And my co-host picked you last. So I'm sorry about that, but my
sorry.
God, you killed it.
Thank you. Don't be sorry at all. I remember those are the first few pieces of like media that came out before everything even started airing. And I literally would like had my headphones in walking around the farmer's market and I was listening to a bunch of different drafts. And honestly, by like the fourth podcast that's picked me last, I just stopped listening because I felt like I didn't need to listen to all of them because I knew what it would be. But to be honest, like for me, that was a fun feeling because I knew what had already happened. And so it was more of like okay. And I don't blame anybody. Like if you're a betting man, like I understand. But I think that makes the show like pretty fun to watch. And like for me, it was, it was kind of funny. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Now we did say nice things on the draft. We were like, oh, she's young and hungry, and she's going to be going into this proving something to everybody and watching the show. So even though she was picked last, I think she's going to do great. So
there's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I didn't say that, but I was like, we said it very nicely, but yeah. So, but man, did you prove us wrong? And I was never happier to be proven wrong in my entire life. So awesome job. So episode 6, I thought was really funny because you did this mustard green dessert thing, which on paper should not have worked. And Maddie Matheson 10 years ago said it's not going to work. So walk me through the story of what happened 10 years ago that Maddie Matheson was on the phone talking about your dessert, and then him being on the show just by chance eating the same thing and going, it works.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, could not have planned that better if I'd tried. So essentially, I was working at a restaurant in Boston. And I had just finished culinary school. I was working at this restaurant. I had started doing savory, and then there was an opportunity to join the pastry department. And I spent the majority of my time there actually on that team. But again, like I went to school for one thing, and so I'm learning on the job, and it's different. I think honestly, it's more valuable even just being in an actual live setting and learning on the go. But I was, a few paces behind. By the opportunity, the chance I had to do my own first dessert on that menu, this was that dessert. And I essentially did like a passion fruit mango panna cotta situation. There was a lot of oats involved as far as like texture. And then it was less centered around the mustard greens. But as I was walking out to line up that night to show the kitchen what I was presenting, I just remember having this feeling of like, oh, everyone here, like their plates are so pretty. Like everything has these beautiful garnishes on it. And like my dessert is just, it didn't look right to me. So I like walked into the walk-in on my way out of the kitchen and I just grabbed something green and I started like garnishing on it, like rookie mistake. Right. But in my head, I was like trying to make it look beautiful, but I wasn't taking into account flavor. And does this make sense? And so when I presented it, my chef is really great friends with Maddie, and they were on FaceTime, and my chef's just a goofball. And he's like, oh, hold on one second. Maddie, Savannah, present your dish right now. And like hands me the phone, and so I'm like, oh, hi chef, blah, blah. This is my dessert. And he's like, what is that green thing on top? And I was like, it's mustard greens. And he's like, take that off, that doesn't make any sense. And it was this funny moment, but it's like been a funny story I tell at parties, basically. Like, I've always wanted to meet Chef Maddie. And so I can say like, oh, I did. He kind of like, gave me some good advice and like funny. And for me at the time, it felt harsh. It definitely wasn't. I was just a little sensitive. But years later, being in that kitchen, I never thought I would ever try to recreate that dish. But when he walked on and the theme was chaos, to be honest, my first thought was like, what? Like, what am I going to do? Like, this is so broad. And like, I think a lot of us had trouble kind of nailing down what the inspiration was and how we approach it. And then I just had this split second moment of being like, chaos. Like he didn't eat the dish, but I presented a dish to him that was pretty chaotic for multiple reasons before, and it wasn't successful. And I understand why. I understood why pretty quickly, but especially 10 years later, I can look at it and really have a better understanding. And I just immediately felt this huge pull to try and do that again. Because for me, I could really tie in the story of the chaos of like being a young chef, and you're just so green and you're getting all these experiences at once, and you have to understand something, to be able to do it justice. And I was just trying to do things that I didn't have a full understanding of yet. And so I wanted to give them chaos reimagined in a way that had more care and attention to it. And so, yeah, I don't know. It worked out pretty well. Obviously, I knew he wasn't really going to remember that split second conversation, and there are some people who were like, you embarrassed that like you do? And I'm like, no, like that was that moment for me was like very helpful. And, I thought about it fondly, very much. And so to be able to kind of end that in like a really beautiful full circle way was nice.
Yeah, so now you get a little addendum to your party story there to
Yeah.
close it out. And
Can you imagine
so,
if it didn't go well? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it turns out he was right. It didn't work now, but now you have a way to complete that. It's like, and I proved him wrong. So that dessert was a game time decision when you saw Maddie walking in, essentially, right?
Yeah. And even the whole prep, because, we had a night prep the day before, and then we came in and we had a few hours to execute. But the night before, I really was going back and forth between two dishes, and one was like a savory panna cotta situation. And then I had taken my golden milk mousse and I had set it. And then I also saved some, and I went to bed that night. And I just remember thinking like, it's not like, it doesn't feel chaotic enough, and it feels safe. And that's what I've been doing for weeks now. And I haven't really gotten anywhere with it. And so I came back in the next day and I was like, okay, well, the panna cottas are set. I can definitely use this if my plan B doesn't work out. So it's still there if I need it, but I want to like swing for the fences. And then I just came in the next day and I was like, okay, here we go. Like I'm going to stuff it in here, and we're going to really lean into the mustard greens, and we're going to put it with everything. We're going to garnish it with it. We're going to pickle them. We're going to have a sauce. And like, I'm really glad that I had the confidence to take those risks, but
Yeah.
it worked.
Yeah. So episode 9 was really the turning point for you. There was a switch that flipped in that episode, because after that you went on a run. I mean, you were clearly the one to beat on the back half of the season. But what was it about that episode that flipped the switch for you? I mean, you had that killer dessert. It was the squash and maple jelly cake that was kind of a happy accident, it seemed, and that you created something new, I guess. But what was it about that episode that really turned the afterburners on for you for the back half of the season?
Yeah, I think it's funny that a lot of my like my big success stories are always like, oh, happy accidents. I like telling people I'd love to be able to harness that energy and like be able to use it more appropriately when I want to. But I'm so grateful. I feel like that challenge, specifically I had read Sean's book. I had really been inspired by the fact that they were providing the ingredients for us, like from their own family and friends. It felt like there was a big weight to it. And I also think that for somebody who's still finding their culinary voice, something I can definitely I stand behind no matter what is that I want to make ingredients shine, and I want to put really good ingredients at the forefront of every decision I make. And so the fact that we got to start with these beautiful ingredients, it just felt more of my wheelhouse. And they wanted us to make those ingredients shine. They didn't want us to overly manipulate them or give them something that was, hard to recognize. So for me, having that as the backbone, but also have found throughout this competition that I think I do better a little bit like on the fly, and having to make these snap decisions very quickly and not having too much time to really sit and think. And so that challenge specifically, we run into the kitchen and we're really seeing the pantry for the first time. You had an idea of what you were walking into, but not enough to actually plan your whole dish out. And so I had left myself open with different ideas. I knew I wanted to do like a savory dessert. And then I saw what I had and I had to just like decide. And it was so much easier for me just to like look at it and break it down in terms of like fruitiness, acid, fat. All these things just seemed a lot clearer. And then I feel like when I was cooking, even though there were a few mistakes here and there, my goal the entire time was just to make sure that I was having fun and I was cooking these ingredients and giving them, their due justice. So I don't know. I think just like having that mental really helped me out, versus feeling tight and feeling like I was trying to like force a square into like a circular hole. So
Yeah. I mean, it's rare that the judges of Top Chef see something new. So when they saw this dessert and they're like, "Oh, this is entirely new," never had that. It was really neat to kind of see their eyes light up for a second and really experience like a brand new dish that they've never seen or heard before. So yeah, that was great. That was great.
thank you. It was fun watching it because you don't get to see their reactions, obviously, at the judges' table all the
Right.
time. So getting
Right.
to watch it back, I was like, yes, like,
Right. Nailed it. So episode 10, how's the cut? How,
oh,
how
she's good.
how's your hand?
They did a great job. I've never had stitches before. Those are my first stitches. And to be honest, I think just everything else about that day was so much worse than the actual cut. I mean, it definitely was a gusher. Like it was bleeding. I remember
It looked
looking,
gnarly.
oh my God, like I've never seen the inside of my hand flipped inside out. Like it was kind of nasty. Yeah. I also just don't do well with things of that nature. I have like multiple stories of growing up and cutting myself and passing out. So I think all of that was much harder than the actual cut. They bandaged me up. You can't even see it now. So it's okay, but the memories will last forever.
Right.
On Bravo.
All five fingers work, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So episode 12, I think, is probably the peak of your time at Top Chef. What I call the personal growth potato pave, because I like the alliteration. But that I think beyond the dish. I mean, the dish was great, but I think beyond the dish was the storytelling about the dish that made me rewind it and listen to it again because it fits so well with the challenge. And it's, I think, one of the few times that I've seen this personal story type challenge where people weren't trying to cram a story into a dish or vice versa, that this really came together for you in a way that was cohesive, that made sense, and was a story that, man, people could relate to. So kind of walk us through that decision as you were shopping for the food and kind of thinking about what you wanted to do, that this particular story that resonated so well with everyone came to be.
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, again, like I was flip-flopping, and I feel like I can be pretty indecisive. And I was shopping for two different dishes at that time because I was really torn between. At one point, I thought like maybe I'll redo something from like the second episode because it was a moment where I was really self-conscious, and they actually like our team won and they liked my dish, and I went against like technically up at the same time as Kevin, and so I remember having all these feelings, and that was my original inspiration. And then I was kind of like, yeah, that's not a good enough story for me, and like I don't think that does my story justice. And I wanted to focus. I'm a positive person in general, and so I wanted to focus on the positive side of what I had experienced and who I was now. And so, to be honest, like I was laying in bed, and I just remember even in the episode, I was like, yo, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I can't make this fit, and like I really didn't want to go up there and it sound like I was trying to force something. And so I was laying in bed, and I had also bought, chicken and potatoes and all these things because that was the first dish that I had done was roasted chicken with a pommes puree. And so my thought was like, number one, just from like an eating it standpoint, it'd be fun to flip it, and it would be interesting to make the potato the star, and then the chicken kind of plays a backbone and give you some herbaceous and fruity notes that kind of complement the potato. But I was laying there and I was like, should I like do a pave? Like that seems a little risky. Like, are they just going to be like, this really, like, to get you into the finale, you're going to cook us a pave? But I knew it would be impressive if I could pull it off in that amount of time. And I was laying in bed staring at the ceiling, and I had my pen and paper, and I remember just trying to like piece a story. And I don't know, I was like just staring at the ceiling, and I remember thinking like, a potato is starchy. It has everything it needs. We don't add anything really to a pave. Like, you season it with cream, but you're not putting anything in there to make that hold. It naturally contains it. And what brings it out? Like, the heat of the oven and the fact that you press it and the pressure. And I just had this like moment of like, I'm a potato. And, and I was like, I'm a potato, and I'm going to compare myself to a potato on national TV, but like, this feels right. And like, it just felt perfect. And I just remember literally like, I put my pen and paper down and I turned off the light and I was like, good night. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Like, I felt really good, but it wasn't immediate. I really had to think about it, but I was really proud and happy with that as well.
Did you practice the pitch in front of the war mirror the next morning?
I 1000% practiced the pitch. I did. I was like, because I didn't want it to sound cheesy, but because I can be very like sentimental, and I cried like every other episode. So like, that's just, I'm an emotional, like feely type of person, and I just felt like it sounded like a story I would tell. It rung true, and it's accurate. That is what makes a pave. And so I definitely practice. I also remember telling, the guys, I was like, and Laura, I was like, all right, here's what I'm thinking. And like, I said it, and they were like, that's pretty good. And I was like, all right, if you guys like it, I like it. We're going to leave it alone.
Yeah. I mean, it was great. It was such a great story about heat and pressure, and everything in the potato is there, and it just needs that heat and pressure, which is the story of you in this season, which I thought was really fitting. And I think that really resonated with the judges. So good job on that one.
Thank you.
So we get to the finals. There's a huge 6-week gap, which in recent memory, I think that's the largest gap between that last day of filming in Wisconsin and then getting to the finals. Life happened in 6 weeks. I mean, Danny ran a marathon. You got engaged. Life kind of went back to somewhat normal for a little while. Do you think that 6-week gap, that long 6-week gap, was more of a help or a hindrance to you personally? Because you were on a roll coming into that, and I really feel like that 6-week gap just screeched to a halt. That those afterburners we talked about earlier. Did you feel like that was a long gap there that kind of hurt you a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, I own every mistake that I make. So I'm not, the 6-week gap affected everybody differently, right? So it's, for me personally, I would say getting out of like, you're in this crazy schedule, there's like someone knocking on your door at 6 or 7 a.m. They hand you a chef coat. All right, let's go. And then you're working long days, and it's very, I don't know, like it felt like being in a positive way, like the structure of like being in the military or, something like that. And I found myself thriving under those circumstances, and especially getting, that heat of the last few weeks, and you gain confidence. And I never thought that it felt like cockiness. Like I just genuinely was just like, yes, oh, yay, like I did it. And like, that feeling was really helpful to me, especially, towards episode 12. And then, I came home, and in my mind, it's like, I am going to spend this time and be a student again. Like I have a 6-week dedicated time. I know what I'm walking into. I know what I need to be prepared for. I know these other contestants now. And that's another layer of, being able to prepare. But I do think there's like that shock of coming home and you're being surrounded by things that like bring you comfort. And ultimately, like, I think it did hurt me. Like I definitely kept studying and practicing, but I think it knocked me off my game a little bit, and it's definitely something I have regrets over, but I can't change it now.
Well, look, it was a great experience, and I think it affected everybody a little bit differently. Kind of watching back the finals, everybody had a little bit of struggles, but I mean, overall, I think you did a great job. What's the future hold for you? What do you got going on in the next few weeks, few months? What projects should people be on the lookout from Chef Savannah Miller over coming up soon?
Yeah, so actually in 2 days we have a bunch of the cast coming down to Raleigh, and we're doing like a family reunion dinner with Manny and at his restaurant, which is really fun. So I'm looking forward to that. I get to see a lot of my friends tomorrow. But outside of that, I'm really curious about where this experience will take me and what opportunities it will open up. I've found out that I really enjoyed like cooking under this type of competition. And so I'd be interested to like do more things like that in the future. I love the opportunity I got to connect with people. Like people are my favorite thing. And I just think that that's why I got into cooking in the first place. So any opportunity I have to do more of that. But otherwise, I am at Tempora in Durham, and it's been crazy busy. Like it's been amazing, and so I just hope that we get to stay that way, and I get to keep meeting people and connecting with them and hearing about their experience watching the show and like planning a wedding, I guess.
Oh, that's right, planning a wedding.
All that stuff.
Great. So, where can people follow you on socials that want to keep up with all the goings on in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So my Instagram is at SavvySav, SAVVYSAVV, and that's pretty much it. I don't dabble too much in the other stuff. I don't know how to TikTok.
I'm learning. Man, TikTok's for the youngins. I'm really bad at it, but great. Well, Chef Savannah, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you sharing some stories from inside Top Chef. It's a rare opportunity to get a peek behind the curtain. So, just thank you for your openness, and hope to see you on some more competition shows coming up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.